The sun was just rising over the small countryside town when Mark stepped out of his farmhouse, stretching his arms and breathing in the cool morning air. For him, the farm was not only a home. It was a quiet world where he could work in peace, far away from noise, trouble, and most importantly, far away from bossy neighbors and HOA rules. He had chosen this land for a reason. There were no strict rules, no committees, and no one telling him what color his house should be or where he could park his truck. It was open land, calm land, and every morning he felt thankful for it. Mark walked down the dirt path and headed toward the small wooden bridge that crossed a narrow stream. The bridge wasn't fancy, but it was strong. He had built it with his own hands when he first bought the property. It allowed him to reach the backside of his farm where he grew vegetables and stored extra supplies. Every time he crossed it, he felt proud. It reminded him of all the work he had put into building a simple, peaceful life. The birds were already awake, singing in the trees. The water under the bridge moved slowly, making soft sounds as it touched the rocks. The wind carried a light smell of pine and fresh soil. Everything was still. Everything was quiet. Mark loved that. He wasn't a man who needed much, just his land, his work, and some space to breathe. For years, he had lived here without problems. No one came onto his land without permission. No one complained about his animals or his fence or his old red barn. It was the perfect place for a man who liked to mind his own business. But that peaceful morning, something felt slightly different. Mark couldn't name it, but there was a strange feeling in the air, like a tiny warning that something unusual was coming his way. He brushed the thought aside. Maybe he was just tired from the long week. After checking the fields, Mark headed back toward the farmhouse. As he walked, he noticed something he had never seen before, something that didn't belong on his property. A white piece of paper was stuck under the latch of his front gate. Mark slowed down. He frowned. That paper was not there yesterday. Curious, he walked closer. The paper fluttered lightly in the breeze as if calling for attention. When he reached it, he pulled it free and unfolded it slowly. He expected maybe an advertisement, or maybe a note from a delivery driver. But what he read made no sense at all. Violation notice. Remove unauthorized structure immediately. Community HOA, signed, Karen. Mark blinked a few times, confused. Violation notice? HOA? Karen? He looked around as if expecting someone to jump out from behind the gate and say it was a prank. But of course, no one was there. Only the open fields and the quiet morning. Mark was sure of one thing: he did not live under any HOA. His property was outside the town limits. He had checked that carefully before buying the land. There was no community committee here. No board. No rules. Just open land. So why did someone send him an HOA violation? And who was Karen? He looked again at the letter. It claimed that he had an unauthorized structure. He had no idea what they meant. His farmhouse was legal. His barn was legal. His shed was legal. He had permits for everything. The only other structure was the small wooden bridge on the stream. Mark shook his head. No HOA had authority here. This letter was a mistake. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The clean, printed text. The sharp tone. The bold warning at the bottom. Failure to comply will lead to further action. Further action? From who? And why? Mark placed the notice on his kitchen table and made himself coffee, hoping the warm drink would help him think. But the more he stared at the paper, the stranger it felt. Someone had taken the time to print it, sign it, and walk all the way to his gate. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted him to see this. And that someone believed they had power over his land. Mark didn't like that idea. Not one bit. He tried to go back to his normal chores, feeding the animals, cleaning the tools, checking the fence, but his mind kept drifting back to the paper. He had never had trouble with anyone in the town. He didn't even know most of his neighbors well. He lived far enough away that no one ever bothered him. Until now. Maybe he should ignore it. Maybe it would go away. But something in his gut told him this wasn't the kind of problem that disappeared on its own. Someone had taken the first step, and he needed to understand why. By midday, Mark made up his mind. He would go into town the next morning. He would talk to someone at the town office or whoever handled property maps. He wanted to see exactly where this HOA claimed his land was. And he wanted to find out who this Karen person was. That night, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the sky in soft orange and purple, Mark felt that same strange feeling again, the feeling that his peaceful life was about to be disturbed. He didn't know it yet, but this simple violation notice was only the beginning. A warning. A signal. Something was coming to his quiet farm. Something loud. Something bossy. Something called Karen. And she was about to make his life very, very complicated. The next morning, Mark woke up early, determined to solve the mystery of the strange violation notice. The farm was quiet as usual, but today the silence felt different, almost tense, as if the land itself was waiting for something to happen. Mark tried to shake off the feeling. It was probably nothing. Still, the image of that bold signature, Karen, sat in the back of his mind like an unwanted guest. He fed the animals, locked the farmhouse door, and drove into town. The drive was peaceful, with long roads stretching between fields, but Mark kept replaying yesterday's moment when he found the paper on his gate. He wasn't a man who worried easily, yet something about this situation bothered him deeply. Someone had entered his land without asking, claimed authority they didn't have, and warned him about a structure that had no connection to any HOA. When he reached the town center, he pulled into the dusty parking lot of the municipal office. The old brick building looked the same as always, quiet, slow, and stuck in time. Inside, he found Miss Peters, the clerk who knew almost everything about property lines and local zoning rules. She smiled politely. "Morning, Mark. What brings you here so early?" Mark placed the notice on her desk. "I got this yesterday. It says I'm breaking HOA rules." Miss Peters adjusted her glasses and read the letter. Her eyebrows lifted. "HOA? Out where your farm is? That's strange. There's no homeowners association anywhere near your property." "That's what I thought," Mark said. She turned to her computer, typed for a minute, and pulled up a map. She pointed at the screen. "See? The nearest HOA is Ridgeview Community. But it stops right here, almost a mile away from your land. So someone from that HOA thinks they control my farm?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Miss Peters gave a soft, knowing sigh. "If this is from Ridgeview, then the name Karen doesn't surprise me. She's the head of their HOA board. Very determined woman. Likes rules. Loves power." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" "Oh, everyone knows her," Miss Peters said. "Last year she tried to fine a man for having a mailbox that was too cheerful. She once told the pizza delivery guy he can't park on the street because it ruined the community image. She even reported a family's Christmas lights for being too bright." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. "Sounds like someone who doesn't mind trouble." "She doesn't," Ms. Peters replied. "But she usually stays inside Ridgeview. She has no business with your land." Mark thanked her and left the office, but the conversation only made the mystery grow. Why was this HOA woman suddenly interested in him? And why the bridge? It wasn't visible from the road unless someone walked far onto his property. He needed more answers. Mark decided to drive toward Ridgeview Community. It was a neat neighborhood, clean houses, trimmed hedges, and identical mailboxes standing in perfect rows. It was the kind of place where every driveway looked the same and where people peeked through their curtains the moment a stranger drove by. As Mark walked down the sidewalk, he noticed a few residents glancing at him with curious eyes. Word traveled quickly in small towns, and a newcomer always attracted attention. Then, he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me. You can't park there." Mark turned around and saw a woman marching toward him with fast, stiff steps. She was in her late 40s, with short blonde hair, bright sunglasses, and a clipboard held like a weapon. Her expression was sharp, like she had been waiting all morning for something to complain about. There was no doubt this was Karen. She stopped in front of him and lifted her chin. "You are on HOA-controlled land. Parking is for residents only." Mark kept his voice steady. "I'm not here to park. I'm here to ask about this." He held up the violation notice. Karen's whole face changed. Her eyes narrowed behind the sunglasses. Her lips pressed tight. "Ah," she said slowly. "So you finally got my message." "Your message?" Mark repeated. "I don't live in your HOA. Why did you leave this on my gate?" Karen took a step closer, standing so straight it looked like she was trying to be taller. "Your property affects our community. Your wooden bridge is a danger. You must remove it." Mark stared at her, shocked. "My bridge? That bridge is on private land, my land. And how do you even know about it?" Karen didn't blink. "We inspect the surrounding areas for community safety." "No," Mark said. "You trespassed. You walked onto my farm without permission." Karen waved her hand as if brushing away dust. "Rules are rules. You should be grateful. I'm giving you a chance to correct your violations." Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What violations?" "You don't have authority over my property." Karen gave him a cold smile, the kind of smile that held more threat than kindness. "You will understand soon enough. This community has standards, and we won't let anyone lower them." Mark stepped back, keeping his temper in check. "Listen, lady. I respect your community. But my farm is not part of it. I don't answer to your HOA." Karen took a deep breath, clearly annoyed that someone dared disagree with her. "We'll see." Her tone was quiet but sharp, like a blade sliding into a sheath, waiting to be used later. Mark turned and walked back toward his truck, but as he did, he felt her eyes burning into his back. Not just watching, measuring, planning. Something told him this wasn't the end of it. This was only the start. And whatever Karen wanted, she wasn't going to give up easily. For the next few days, life on the farm returned to its usual rhythm, or at least Mark tried to make it feel that way. He woke early, fed the animals, checked the fields, and went about his work. But something had changed inside him. The peace was still there, but it felt thinner, fragile, like a glass window that could break with one wrong knock. Karen's voice kept replaying in his head. "We'll see." It was the kind of sentence that didn't end when it should. It followed him, like a shadow. Mark told himself not to worry. One strange woman couldn't ruin his whole life. But on the third morning after meeting her, he found something that made his stomach twist. A second notice. This one was taped directly to his barn door, flapping in the breeze. He froze. Violation notice, warning number 2. Failure to comply with HOA guidelines will lead to corrective action. Signed again. Karen. Mark looked around his property slowly. The farm was quiet. Too quiet. Whoever placed this had been here recently. Maybe minutes ago. Maybe even watching from somewhere far back behind the trees. A shiver crawled up his spine. He took the paper, crumpled it in his fist, and said out loud, "This is not her land." But his voice didn't feel strong. It felt like he was trying to convince himself. He checked his security camera screen inside the house, but the device had been unplugged. Not dead. Not broken. Unplugged. Someone had touched it. That was no mistake. That was no accident. That was a message. The next day, the harassment grew bolder. Mark was repairing a fence post when he heard a car engine at the front of his property. He wiped his hands and walked toward the gate, expecting a delivery truck. But it wasn't. It was Karen's silver SUV. And she wasn't alone. Two members of the HOA board, both wearing matching blue polo shirts with the Ridgeview logo, were standing beside her, all holding clipboards like they were preparing for battle. Karen stepped forward, sunglasses glinting in the sunlight. "We're here for an inspection." Mark stared at her. "Inspection of what?" "Your land," she replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "We notified you in our letter." "No," Mark said firmly. "You notified me of imaginary violations. And you have no right to be here. You need to leave. Now." Karen's smile tightened. "We don't need permission." "Yes," Mark said calmly but strongly, "you do. This is private property." One of the board members whispered something into Karen's ear. She listened, nodded, and then took out her phone. "I'm calling the authorities," she said. Mark lifted an eyebrow. "Good. Call them. I'll wait." Karen hesitated. Her plan wasn't going the way she imagined. But she couldn't back down, not with her two board members watching. So she made the call. Within 15 minutes, a sheriff deputy arrived. Karen stormed toward him immediately. "Officer, this man is refusing to comply with community safety inspections." The deputy, a calm older man named Officer Reeves, knew Mark well. He looked from Karen to Mark, then back to Karen. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this property isn't part of any HOA." Karen blinked, stunned. But he's nearby. And we saw a bridge on his land that we believe is unsafe." Officer Reeves sighed. "Ma'am, you can't inspect private land that doesn't belong to your association." Mark crossed his arms. "I've told her that." Karen took a sharp breath, her face turning red. Well, then his land should be part of our HOA. It affects the environment of Ridgeview." Officer Reeves shook his head. "That's not how the law works." Karen's eyes narrowed at Mark like he had personally insulted her existence. "This isn't over." The board members looked embarrassed as they followed her back to the SUV. Mark watched the car disappear down the road, but the uneasy feeling didn't leave him. If anything, it grew stronger. Karen wasn't done. Over the next week, the harassment became persistent, almost daily. Delivery drivers stopped coming all the way down his road. One said a community official told him the road was restricted. A weed control company arrived unexpectedly, saying Karen ordered them to treat the land. A surveyor showed up with a map claiming Karen reported property line confusion. Random people from Ridgeview drove by slowly, staring at Mark like he was a zoo exhibit. And every morning, another paper appeared. On his truck windshield. On his fence post. On his porch railing. All the same message. Remove the unauthorized structure. It didn't take long for Mark to realize something even stranger. Karen wasn't focusing on the barn. Or the shed. Or the animals. She only cared about the wooden bridge. Why? What did she want with that simple bridge across the stream? Mark decided to test something. He set up 2 new cameras, small ones, hidden ones. One by the barn and one near the bridge. That night, he didn't sleep much. He kept listening for footsteps or car sounds. The wind rustled the trees outside, but nothing else seemed out of place. The next morning, he went straight to the cameras. The barn camera was fine. But the bridge camera? Dead. Not unplugged this time. Smashed. Someone had walked half a mile across his land in the dark and destroyed the camera. The small metal case was bent, as if hit with something heavy. Mark stared at the broken device in his hand. His heart beat faster, not in fear, but in anger. This was not simple harassment anymore. This was obsession. Karen wasn't trying to annoy him. She was trying to push him out. To scare him away. To take control of something she believed belonged to her. And if she was bold enough to smash a camera in the middle of the night, what would she do next? Mark looked out toward the wooden bridge, quiet in the morning sun. He didn't know it yet, But the answer was coming soon, much sooner than he expected. And it would hit harder than anything so far. The night before it happened, the farm felt strangely restless. Mark couldn't explain it, but every sound seemed louder than usual: the creaking barn door, the wind scratching against the windows, the distant hoot of an owl. Even the stream behind the fields sounded different, like the water was warning him of something he couldn't see. Mark tried to sleep, but his mind refused to settle. He kept thinking about the smashed camera near the bridge. Someone had walked across his land with confidence, like they believed they had the right to be there. Like they believed the farm already belonged to them. And only one person had shown that kind of attitude. Karen. He finally drifted into a light sleep, but it didn't last long. A loud crack shook him awake. It was sharp, echoing, and wrong, completely wrong for a quiet night on the farm. Mark sat up instantly. Another sound followed. Thud. Thud. Whack. Adrenaline shot through him. He grabbed his flashlight, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. The night air was cold and heavy. Clouds covered the moon, turning the land into a dark, blurry shape. Then another noise. Bang! This one came from the direction of the bridge. Mark didn't waste a second. He ran. Down the dirt path. Through the tall grass. Past the old fence. His flashlight beam shook with each step, bouncing off trees and rocks, but the sounds ahead pushed him faster. When he finally reached the stream, he stopped, frozen. There was someone there. A shadowy figure standing on the wooden bridge. Holding something long, maybe a crowbar, or a metal pipe. The person swung the tool again. Crack. The sound was unmistakable. Wood breaking. Hey! Mark shouted. The figure jerked like a startled animal, then turned toward him. For a second, the flashlight beam caught a glimpse of the face. Short blonde hair. Dark sunglasses, even at night. Lips pressed tight with anger. Karen. She didn't speak. She didn't run either. She just glared at him with a wild, almost electric rage in her eyes, as if he was the one trespassing on her land. Before Mark could move closer, she swung the tool one last time. Crack! The biggest beam under the bridge snapped in half. The whole structure groaned like it was crying out in pain. Karen dropped the tool, stepped off the bridge, and disappeared into the trees on the Ridgeview side. By the time Mark ran after her, she was gone. All that remained was the sound of water rushing faster now that broken pieces had fallen into it, and the half-destroyed bridge, tilting dangerously to one side. Mark stood there in the darkness, chest rising and falling, unable to process what had just happened. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was destruction. And she had done it with her own hands. When the sun rose, the full damage came into view. The bridge was completely ruined. The main beam had been cut, shattered, and kicked into the water. Broken planks floated down the stream like dead leaves. Nails stuck out at odd angles, bent and twisted. His flashlight from the night before lay on the ground where he dropped it, cold and dirty. And right in the middle of the wreckage. A paper. Mark stepped carefully across the mud and picked it up. Another notice. But this one was different. It was stamped in red ink. Final HOA warning, structure removed for community safety. Signed, Karen. Mark felt heat rise in his chest: anger, disbelief, shock. Community safety? She had broken onto his land. At night. Destroyed something he built with his own hands. And then acted like she had done him a favor? He stared at the destroyed bridge, feeling something shift inside him. A quiet man like Mark rarely got angry. But this wasn't just property damage. It was violation. It was trespassing. It was a message. Karen was telling him she could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, and nobody could stop her. Not anymore, Mark thought. Not today. He walked back to the farmhouse and called the sheriff. Officer Reeves arrived an hour later. When he saw the bridge, he let out a long sigh. She did this, Mark said plainly. Officer Reeves didn't argue. I believe you. Together they searched the ground. In the mud near the stream, they found footprints and tire marks that led toward Ridgeview. That's enough evidence to question her, the sheriff said. And if she admits anything or slips up, we'll take the next steps. Mark nodded. Good. Because this needs to end. But Officer Reeves looked uneasy. There's something you should know, he said. Karen has been pushing the HOA to expand their borders. She wants more land added to Ridgeview. Said it's for community improvement. Mark felt a chill. She wants my farm. I think so, the sheriff replied. She's been talking about new development. Houses. Parks. She wants control. And she thinks she can bully people into giving up their land. Mark stared at the broken bridge again, then back at the sheriff. Well, he said quietly, she just picked the wrong farmer. But Mark didn't know yet. Karen wasn't ashamed. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't sorry. She was proud. Later that afternoon, Karen walked around Ridgeview with her head high, telling neighbors she had removed a dangerous structure and protected the community. She acted like a hero. But she didn't know Mark had photos. She didn't know about the smashed camera pieces he saved. She didn't know the sheriff had taken footprints. She didn't know a storm was coming, and this time it wasn't weather. It was Mark. And he was done being quiet. The day after the bridge destruction, the farm felt different, no longer peaceful, no longer calm. The air seemed heavier, like the land itself was angry with what happened. Even the animals behaved strangely. The chickens stayed near the barn. The dog kept pacing near the front gate, ears twitching at every sound. Mark wasn't the same either. Something inside him had hardened. For years, he lived quietly, never causing trouble. But Karen had crossed a line no one should cross. She had stepped onto his land, destroyed his property, and acted proud about it. Now, the quiet man had decided to fight back. Mark spent the early morning walking around the stream, taking pictures from every angle. Broken planks. Crushed nails. Footprints in the mud. Tire tracks leading toward Ridgeview. Every detail mattered. He climbed down to the water and pulled out a large beam from the broken bridge. It was heavy, soaked, and cracked right through the middle, exactly where Karen had hit it. He set it in the grass like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. When he finished, he returned to the farmhouse and laid everything out on the kitchen table: photos, the red stamped notice, the smashed camera from last week, and Karen's earlier violation papers. On top of those, he placed the broken wooden beam. A powerful reminder of what she had done. He stood there for a moment, staring at the pile. This wasn't simply a disagreement anymore. This was war. Later that morning, the sheriff's truck pulled into the driveway. Officer Reeves stepped out with a serious look on his face. "We've got enough for a case," he said. "But Karen won't go down easy." Mark nodded. "I don't expect her to." The sheriff lifted the broken beam from the table. "This is strong evidence. And the footprints, the tire marks. It's clear she was here." "Now what?" Mark asked. Officer Reeves scratched his chin. "I'm going to question her today. See how she reacts. But I want you to be careful. People like her, people who want control, they don't stop when they're challenged." Mark gave a small, cold smile. "Neither do I." After the sheriff left, Mark drove into town to meet a lawyer, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Miss Grant, known for winning difficult cases. She listened quietly as Mark explained everything from the first violation notice to the late-night destruction. When he finished, she tapped her pen on the table. "This isn't just harassment," she said. "This is property damage, trespassing, intimidation, and possibly more." Mark nodded. "I figured." "Good," she replied. "Because we're going to build a strong legal case. And trust me, HOA bullies don't like courtrooms." She typed quickly, gathering information, writing notes. Collect every paper she left. Every message. Every witness who saw her near your land. And don't speak to her directly anymore. If she comes again, record everything and call the sheriff. Mark leaned back, feeling something he hadn't felt for a long time, confidence. He finally had a plan. By afternoon, Mark returned to the farm. The land felt less heavy now. Maybe the air sensed that he wasn't helpless anymore. But he wasn't done. He spent the rest of the day fixing the front fence and putting up new cameras, stronger, hidden, and high enough that no one could smash them without climbing a tree. He added motion sensors too, the kind that lit up the entire field if anyone stepped close at night. This time, if Karen came back, he would know. He also placed a large private property, "No trespassing" sign at the gate. Not because he needed it legally, but because it sent a message. He wanted Karen to see it. To feel it. To understand she was no longer stepping onto land of a quiet farmer. She was stepping onto land of a man prepared to fight. Just before sunset, Mark received a call from Officer Reeves. "We questioned her," the sheriff said. "She denied everything." Mark expected that. The sheriff continued, "But she said something strange. Something about your land being community land soon. And that you were standing in the way of progress." Mark felt anger pulse through him. "She thinks she can take my land." "I think she's planning something big," the sheriff replied. "Bigger than a broken bridge." Mark looked out across his fields, golden in the evening light. "Let her plan. I'm ready now." That night, Mark didn't sleep much. He sat on the porch with his dog, keeping an eye on the dark fields. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and bright, and the motion lights glowed every time a rabbit or bird passed by. But no Karen. No SUVs. No footsteps. No trespassers. It was quiet, too quiet, but at least not dangerous. Or so he thought. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. It was the lawyer, Ms. Grant. "I found something," her text read. "Call me in the morning. It's important." Mark didn't know what she discovered, but something told him it would change everything. He leaned back in the chair, letting the cold night wind hit his face. He had survived the bridge destruction. He had faced Karen's harassment. He had gathered evidence and built a legal wall around his land. He wasn't afraid anymore. Karen wanted a fight. Now she had one. And the next move would be hers. What Mark didn't know was that Karen was already preparing her move, one louder, bigger, and more dangerous than anything she had done before. The bridge incident had only been her warning shot. The real battle was about to begin. The next morning, Mark woke before sunrise. He hadn't slept much, but he didn't feel tired, only alert. Focused. Something in the air felt charged, like the farm was holding its breath. Right at 7 a.m., he called his lawyer, Ms. Grant. She answered immediately. "Mark," she said, her voice serious. "I found something last night. Something you need to know." Mark tightened his grip on the phone. "Tell me." "You're not going to like this," she warned. "But Karen has been planning something for months." Half an hour later, Mark was sitting in her office. Papers, maps, and printed emails were spread across her desk like puzzle pieces. Ms. Grant pointed to a large map of Ridgeview community. "This," she said, "is the current HOA border." Then she pointed to another map, this one bigger, bolder, with new red lines that stretched far beyond Ridgeview. "And this," she continued, "is what the HOA wants to expand into." The red lines reached all the way to Mark's land. Right through his fields. Right over his barn. Right across the stream, including the bridge Karen destroyed. Mark leaned back, stunned. "They want my whole farm?" "They want everything on this side of the valley," she confirmed. "Your farm is just the biggest part." Mark felt heat rising in his chest. "How?" "They can't expand without my permission." Ms. Grant nodded. "That's true. But according to their documents, Karen told the HOA board that you were interested in selling. Mark almost choked. What? I've never said anything like that. Yes, she replied. Because Karen lied. And the board believed her. Ms. Grant handed him a printed email, an internal HOA message. There it was, in black and white. Landowner is open to joining HOA land project. No resistance expected. Expansion planned for next quarter. Signed, Karen. Mark stared at the words, unable to speak. She faked everything, Ms. Grant said. She told them you were easy to push. She told them you wouldn't fight. And she told them you already agreed to remove any structures that didn't match HOA rules. Mark's jaw tightened. So the bridge was her proof, Ms. Grant finished. She wanted to show the HOA board that you were cooperating. That destroying it was the first step toward bringing your land into the HOA. Mark shook his head, furious. She thought she could bully me into giving up my home. Ms. Grant gave a cold smile. Correction, she still thinks she can. But that wasn't the end of the shock. The lawyer pulled out one last document, a land development proposal. It showed new homes being planned on Mark's property. Fancy roads. A community playground. A small shopping area called Ridgeview South. All drawn exactly where Mark's fields, barn, and stream were. And there, in bold letters. Phase 1, begin development after removal of existing structures. Lead manager, Karen. Mark stared at the paper for a long moment. Finally, he said, so that's why she smashed the bridge. Yes, Ms. Grant replied. She wanted to clear the land early. She wanted to show the board she was taking action. She wanted to force you off your own property. And the harassment? Mark asked. The notices? The fake inspections? All part of the plan, Ms. Grant said. To make your life difficult. To make you feel like moving. Mark slowly nodded. He understood now. Completely. Karen wasn't crazy. She wasn't confused. She wasn't bored. She was strategic. She wanted power. She wanted expansion. She wanted Mark's land for her project. And she would do anything to get it. On the drive back home, Mark didn't feel fear. Not anymore. He felt something stronger, purpose. As he turned onto his property, he saw a car parked near his gate. A silver SUV. Karen. She stood there with her arms crossed, tapping her foot like she owned the soil beneath it. Mark parked his truck and stepped out slowly. Karen spoke first. You've been busy, she said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. Mark didn't respond. She continued, I heard you've been talking to people. Lawyers. Sheriffs. That's not very cooperative. Mark walked past her and opened his gate. This is my land. I don't have to cooperate with someone who wants to steal it. Karen let out a sharp laugh. Steal? Oh, no, no. This land is going to be something great. A beautiful community. Homes, parks, shops. You should be thankful I'm improving the area. Improving? Mark repeated, turning toward her. By breaking my bridge? By trespassing? By lying? Karen's smile faded. If you had just listened from the start, none of this would have happened. You can't stop Ridgeview's growth. It's too late. Mark stepped closer, his voice calm but icy. So that's it? You're doing all this for a development plan? Karen's expression hardened. Yes. And you're standing in my way. Mark held her stare. For the first time, Karen seemed unsure, just for a second. Like she could see something in his eyes she didn't expect. Strength. Determination. Defiance. No more warnings, Mark said. No more trespassing. The sheriff knows everything. The lawyer knows everything. And soon, the the court will know everything too. Karen's jaw clenched. You think you can take me to court? You think people will believe you over me? Mark didn't look away. I have proof. Evidence. And the law. What do you have? Karen's face twisted, rage bubbling under her skin. I have a community behind me, she hissed. Mark answered quietly, not for long. Karen stormed back into her SUV and drove away, tires spitting dirt behind her. As the dust settled, Mark looked at his land, his fields, his trees, the broken bridge. Now he finally understood everything. Karen's secret. Her lies. Her plan. And he knew one thing for certain. She wasn't done. But neither was he. And the final clash was coming soon. For 2 days, Mark heard nothing from Karen. Not a car near his gate. Not a voice in the distance. Not even another fake violation notice. The silence felt strange, too quiet, like the air was waiting for something big. But Mark didn't waste time. He spent those days repairing the edges of the stream, gathering documents, printing photos, and organizing every piece of evidence he had. He wanted everything ready. On the third morning, as he double-checked his files, his phone rang. Ms. Grant's voice came through, calm and sharp. Mark, she said, the sheriff called me. Karen is requesting a meeting. She's bringing the HOA board with her. Mark's heart steadied. Is she trying to negotiate? That's what she claims, Ms. Grant said. But her tone, it sounded desperate. Be careful. Mark nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I'll be ready. That afternoon, the HOA board drove up to Mark's farm in 3 shiny cars. And right behind them, like a queen stepping onto her stage, Karen arrived in her silver SUV. She stepped out wearing a bright blazer and sunglasses she didn't need. Even on Mark's dusty road, she acted like she was attending a royal ceremony. The board members followed her, 5 people, stiff, uneasy, and clearly nervous. None of them looked at Mark directly. Karen, on the other hand, looked right at him with a tight, fake smile. Good afternoon, Mark, she said loudly, as if speaking for an audience. We're here to discuss a friendly agreement. Mark folded his arms. Then speak. One of the board members stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Mark, he said, we understand there have been misunderstandings. Karen may have acted with too much enthusiasm. Karen shot him a sharp look, but he continued anyway. We would like to resolve this peacefully. No police. No court. We simply ask that you consider selling a small part of your land. Just the area near the stream. Mark didn't react. He didn't blink. He only waited. The board member shifted nervously. The HOA is willing to compensate you fairly. Karen added quickly, and if you cooperate, we can remove all previous notices. Everything becomes clean. Mark finally turned to Karen. Remove your lies too? Karen's smile thinned. Let's not get dramatic. Ms. Grant stepped beside Mark and whispered, they're trying to trap you. Don't agree to anything. Mark nodded silently. Then he stepped forward. No, he said simply. Karen's head jerked up. No? No, Mark repeated. I'm not selling. Not negotiating. And not pretending this was a misunderstanding. A ripple of shock passed across the board members' faces. Karen's voice sharpened. Mark, be reasonable. You're blocking progress for this entire community. This isn't your community, Mark answered. This is my land. Karen's eyes hardened. This land will be HOA property soon. Whether you like it or not. Ms. Grant stepped forward now, holding a folder thick with documents. Her voice was cool and steady. No, it won't, she said. Because everything you've done is recorded, Karen. The trespassing. The destruction of private property. The harassment. And the false statements to your board. Karen's face lost a shade of color. What statements? Mark pulled out one printed email. The same email where she falsely wrote that he wanted to join the HOA expansion. He handed it to the board. They read it slowly. And with every line, their expressions darkened. This, one board member whispered, this can't be real. It's very real, Ms. Grant said. And we have more. She gave them another paper, photos of Karen destroying the bridge. Then more papers, timestamps of her trespassing, her fake notices, her measurements, her threats. The board looked horrified. Karen, one of them said, you told us the landowner agreed. Karen snapped, I had to move fast. You people want results. I gave you results. The board member stepped back, disgusted. This is criminal, Karen. Karen turned red, then pale, then red again. Her voice cracked with anger. You can't blame me, she yelled. This entire expansion was my project. You all begged me to take control. I had to show strength. I did what was necessary. Ms. Grant replied calmly, what you did was illegal. Karen pointed at Mark, her voice shaking. This man is standing in the way of progress. He doesn't understand community needs. Mark looked right into her eyes. I understand perfectly. You wanted my farm for yourself. Karen froze. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to deny it, but she didn't. Because she couldn't. Everyone could see the truth now. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up the road at that exact moment. Karen's eyes widened. No, 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 she whispered. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, tipping his hat. Afternoon, he said. Got a call from Ms. Grant. Seems we've got business here. Karen backed away a step. Then another. Sheriff, she said, forcing a smile, I'm sure we can resolve this. These people don't understand the bigger. You're under investigation, Daniels interrupted. For harassment, property damage, falsifying documents, and trespassing. Karen gasped. You can't arrest me. Daniels shrugged. Didn't say I would. But you will come with me for questioning. The board members didn't say a word. They didn't defend her. They didn't protect her. They just stepped aside. Karen's face twisted with fury. She glared at Mark one last time, eyes burning. This isn't over, she whispered. Mark answered calmly, yes, it is. The sheriff guided her toward the cruiser. She didn't fight, but her hands shook. When the door closed behind her, the farm suddenly felt peaceful again. The board apologized again and again, promising to stop the expansion permanently. They even offered to pay for the new bridge themselves. Mark refused politely. I'll build it my way, he said. The board drove off quietly, like embarrassed children leaving school. And for the first time in weeks, the road was silent. Truly silent. That evening, Mark walked down to the stream. The sun was setting, painting the water gold. He picked up a leftover piece of wood from the broken bridge and smiled softly. This land stays mine, he said to the quiet air. And nobody, not even an HOA Karen, can take it from me. He set down the wood and looked across his fields with pride. Tomorrow, he would start rebuilding. Stronger, safer, better. But tonight, he simply stood there finally free.